This is Robert DeMallie, and this is the third episode of the Torrington Democratic Town Committee podcast. Our guest this evening is Michelle Cook. Michelle is the state representative for the 65th District serving Torrington. She was first elected in 2008 and is currently serving her 8th term in office. Michelle currently serves as a Deputy Speaker Pro Tem. She also serves as a member of the Education, Human Services, Legislative Management, and Public Health Committees. I strongly recommend that everyone listening this evening go to her website and read her very extensive background. Welcome, Michelle.
Well, thank you for having me.
We'd like to start with a question I think most people would love to know, and that is, what do your constituents want you to do for them to make this city a better place to work and live?
Well, Bob, that's such a huge question to answer. It's really about giving them the assistance or a voice that they might not be able to have, or somewhere they might be able to go for some help that they might not recognize they have the ability to go to. At the other end of that, it's also for fighting for things that make Torrington a better place. And whether that means fighting for education, more town road aid, we're looking at the high school project right now. That gives our students such a pride moment to be able to say, that's going to be where I go to school. And so all of those things combined, and also to ensure that we help them with other things, like how do I have health insurance, find a doctor, you name it. There's so many different things that fall under the realm of a state representative. And I think that after I took office, I sit back and I think about the fact that I would have never thought about calling my state representative for the things that people call me for, but I'm so glad that they do.
And what accomplishments have you had so far in these 8 terms of yours that you're most proud of?
So I did just mention the high school. I'm really proud of the high school and all the great work that's been done there by the building committee and all of that. It started with the track and field that we did almost 10 years ago. And now just the entire complex I'm very excited about that. I'm excited about the Friendly Hands Food Bank and the new building that we're able to get there. We just announced today $1.5 million for the Warner Theater that'll be voted on next Tuesday. So I'm excited about that as well, because I think that with the Warner Theater, we've done a significant amount of investment with them from the state level, and I've been proud to partner with them. This is just one more thing for our arts and culture, especially right downtown in our downtown footprint. There's other things that are never put in a newspaper or put on a walk card that I think are just as meaningful, or in fact, sometimes more meaningful. Like when somebody called me and they had an older woman who had custody of her grandchildren, and her hot water heater went out and it was cold, and her oil company couldn't help her, and nobody could help her. And she called me in tears and she goes, I'm afraid I'm going to lose my grandchildren. I don't have a boiler. And we made the necessary calls, and we were able to have her a boiler within 24 hours. That for me really matters. Or the woman whose husband was having surgery and wasn't going to be able to drive for several months in the future, and he was the only licensed driver in the home. And she was trying to get her driver's test so she can make sure that they had the means to be able to go where they needed to go in lieu of his inability to drive while he was recovering. And her driver's test got pushed back. And so by being able to call the Department of Motor Vehicles, explaining the dire situation that they were in, and that she needed to have her driver's test before her husband had the surgery, or they had no means of transportation, those are the things for me that fill my heart in a totally different way than it is building a building or a field or something like that. It's the intimate individual accomplishments that really matter to me.
So how important is to you the time you've spent over the last few years developing relationships in Hartford and other parts of the state?
The relationships that I've been able to develop and build upon, there's no words to that value. And that's the one thing I love about the first time I went out door knocking. And so we're going back 16 years.
Wow.
And talking to people who has lived in this town their whole entire life, and nobody had ever knocked on their door and said, hey, this is who I am. This is what I'm doing. What matters to you? And that's why for me, it's important to do that every year, every election cycle as well. But there's this component where you develop friendships in the most interesting of places with some people that might not have ever been within your reach or your circle, just by taking 5 minutes to knock on their door or making a phone call or returning somebody's call or an email. And last week 2 weeks ago, I was door knocking, and there's a couple, and they've been together now for 46, 48 years. And I've known them now for 16 years. I met them my first campaign season. And one of them is dying from cancer. And for me, it's a bittersweet because I would have never been able to get to know them had I not knocked on their door. But now I would say we're friends. And by knocking on their door a couple weeks ago, I might have been able to say goodbye to somebody that I wouldn't have necessarily, because we don't always, you're not always running in touch with people all the time, and everybody's going a mile a minute. But when I knocked on the door and he was laughing about the story about the first time I walked into his yard and we got to the breezeway and a mouse ran across. And so he was telling the story, and the story that still sticks with him 16 years later was really cool to hear him. And then when he was talking about his health struggles, and just to be able to give him a hug and say, you know what, you got this. And thank you for letting me be a part of your journey. That's why it's important. That's how important it is to me.
Well, talking for a moment about some of the things you've delivered for the very human, one-on-one and small interactions, one of the things that I think about a lot is what you did for the new school. I mean, elaborate a little bit on what your role has been there and why your work is helping to make this a reality.
So my work on the high school complex started probably about 10 years ago when we needed a track and field. And we knew then that the track team wasn't going to be able to compete on the track because it was in dire straits and they didn't have the money in their budget to fix it. And we know that our football field was literally gridirony. Like you couldn't walk through it. It was hard as a rock. There was drainage grates in the field. It was a poor complex. And because we haven't really invested in maintaining our facilities, we saw it fall into disarray. So that was first and foremost for me. And then a couple of years later, after that project was put to rest and we opened the doors and it's a beautiful place, I tried to get a new gymnasium because our ceiling tiles were falling, the floor was at its end, and it really hadn't been updated since it was built in the early 60s. So I brought our state inspectors in and I had them walk the athletic wing of the high school. And they're like, Michelle, we could close you down. And I'm like, all right, so a new gym is out of the question, but we're going to need a new school. And really the conversation started from there. Because if the gymnasium wing was in that bad of shape, I knew that other parts of that facility were in really bad shape. And they never had the money to do a complete renovation. They had piecemealed some things back in the late 90s to the early 2000s, but really never a good updated renovation. And I believe that our students who spend 8 to 10 hours a day most days in their school is their home away from home. And so recognizing all 4 of my children have gone to that school. They're all high school graduates. I believe in the public educational system. How do we make their learning environment better? So the group of folks at the Board of Education and then the outside group of parents that were really fighting for a new high school, traditionally it's a 62% reimbursement. And the voters said, we're in for helping out with that reimbursement. And I'm saying we need to do more at the state. So I went back and talked to my leadership and said, I need more. And they said, what do you need? And it came down to the conversation, which gave us an 85% reimbursement on the project. So that was our initial $159.6 million at 85%. Then the town went back for a referendum at $20 million, thinking that they were only going to get 62%. I was able to get them 85% on that as well. And then last legislative session, we recognized with the pandemic, because the high school project started before the pandemic.
Right.
And then cost went up and times delayed. So we realized, hey, look, we're going to need some more to finish this complex. So I was able to get another $6 million last legislative session at that 85% to really complete the entire facility.
Were you surprised how positive the reaction was from voters? Or did you expect them to come through as they did?
I never underestimate our community. And I know that there are so many families that are generational here and that we always try to put our children first. And if you don't have a good, healthy learning environment and a safe learning environment, being educated becomes a little bit more complicated. We have fabulous teachers. We have fabulous administrators. It's really about just putting all the pieces of the puzzle together. And as much as some folks might say, hey, it's not about the building, I think that you have a blend of a variety of things. And our students deserve something to be very proud of. And when they walk into that facility, there is much to be proud of.
So you are a Democrat, and I'm wondering why should Republicans and unaffiliated voters consider voting for you?
It's funny you asked me that because somebody just asked me that same question on a call a little while ago. Um, I was asked to run for office 16 years ago by Representative Roberta Willis. Never something that I thought about doing. I had always been kind of a very middle of the road person. Um, Being a born and raised Midwesterner, things are a little bit different there. And so when I was asked to run, I'm like, okay, but I'm a registered unaffiliated voter. And they're like, that's fine. Um, we would like you to run on our ticket. And I'm like, okay, you know what? I will do that. But I still find myself very middle of the road. I don't find myself very far to the left. I don't find myself very far to the right. And at the end of the day, it's about the person, I believe, and not necessarily the party. And I'm a part of the moderate, very blue dog caucus at the State House. And that was the original working family Democrats, the factory workers, the union folks, like the people that are really focusing on what happens at the ground level for the working middle class or the lower upper class or what have you. And that's kind of where I find myself. So for me, it's not a hard line to the right. My voting record is very middle of the road. Probably 85 to 90% of my votes are bipartisan, if not all of them, quite frankly, in most ways. And that's the same way that I do my legislation. I just truly believe that when you're elected for office, that you are representing the person. You're not representing the party.
So you ran unopposed last time, but you have an opponent this time, and it's my understanding that your opponent moved back here recently within the year, and is now running for office. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay. So my final question really is regarding the people of Torrington. Why do you feel best qualified to represent them?
I've been in Torrington now since the early 90s. Met my husband in Connecticut, raised our family here. Torrington is our home. So I have roughly 32 years of Torrington experience, give or take, under my belt. And I think that as I look at my commitment to the community, my dedication to making sure that Torrington is not a forgotten place, but has been put on the map. And I've always said, you've heard me say it, there's life past Route 8. And Torrington just needed to be polished. And people need to remember that we are an integral part of the entire Northwest corner. For me, that's kind of where we are. And that's how I've done this job. I've given it my all. I do this full time. I ensure that the constituents come first and that our community comes first. And that's how I run this. And it is not about me and what my family can get out of this job. It is about what I can do for you and what I can do for our community first and foremost, to the absolute best of my ability. And I believe that my track record has shown over the years that I have absolutely most indefinitely put Torrington first. And so when we talk about another 2 years in office, there's so many things that I've been able to do and improvements that I've been able to make. And understand that that's not me by myself. That takes a village to get where we are. But there's still things that need to get done. And fighting with nursing homes to ensure people are safe and making sure that we are not forgotten in Torrington and being able to bring back all of the things that I've been able to bring back and continue to be able to do that for a few more years. I think the record really goes to show that I have tried my very best to put Torrington first and tried to stay away from this party politics kind of a thing and recognize what's best for us. And I understand, right? Not everybody agrees. Not everybody agrees with one side or the other. But I would hope that as we move forward, and especially now, in the times that we are in, that we get away from a one-issue voting situation and we get away from a one-party voting issue. And let's really look at what's the betterment for all of us. Because at the end of the day, in 47 days, give or take, we're going to be making some very difficult decisions, and our future relies on that. And I believe that all of the things that I've done show that I am probably and definitely the best person for that job.
Our guest this evening has been Michelle Cook. She is the state representative for the 65th District, and she is running for reelection. Thank you very much, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Bob. I appreciate it.